let your booty do that yoga.
Party at the beach down in Copacabana. Sipping Gillish, got my black yoga pants on. Me and Brittany.
It's gonna be a dance recital now. So, question. Think for a minute. Do you remember the most ridiculous thing you've ever said? Is Superfood having open tryouts? I was thinking that to myself. I was like, no. Well, I do. I remember that moment for me. It was the first time that I got to introduce myself when I said, hello, my name is Dan Nevins, and I'm a yoga teacher. Like, you have to get that. Like, that is the furthest thing from reality. Even if you rewind back 5 years, just 5 years, if you would have said that I would have been introducing myself anywhere as a yoga teacher, I would have said, you need something in your life, some medication, maybe a doctor, I don't know, but like that, it's not gonna happen for me. You know, I grew up not too far from here in Baltimore in a pretty rough neighborhood. I don't think I even knew what yoga was. Like, I'm really searching back in my memory. I'm like, no, I don't think I've ever even heard of it. And then I escaped my upbringing by joining the Army. Like, that was my call. You know, that's kind of reality, as I did escape my upbringing. I grew up below the poverty line in a really rough part of Baltimore. But it was a little different than that. I just remember, who remembers like 1990? I just had to feel it out. And so the first Gulf War was posturing up. And I remember watching on TV, and you've probably all seen this now. You've seen these units saying goodbye to their families and then going off to war. And that's what I was watching on TV. It was like my babysitter. My mom left when I was 13. My dad was a truck driver. He was gone like every other week. And my brother and I basically raised ourselves. And I grew up on Coca-Cola and lunch meat when that was around. And you know, my dad actually took me to my 13th birthday, said, like, presents are over, like, no more presents for birthdays, and I went and got a work permit. And then that day, I had my first job washing dishes at a dinner theater in Baltimore, and I haven't been unemployed for a day since. And which I'm, like, really proud to put that little badge of pride, like, on my shirt. And I remember, and I'm, like, you know, babysitting myself, like, just watching TV, and I saw the thing that chokes everybody up. It was all the people in uniform hugging their families, and there were tears and smiles and laughter, and then I just didn't get it. Because I just didn't have that. You know, I grew up on Leave It to Beaver reruns and watching that family unit that I just didn't relate to, and, you know, grew up on The Cosby Show. Turned out Bill Cosby wasn't so great, but Cliff Huxtable was the man, right? Like, he was Family Guy, like he was the guy. And, you know, I just didn't get the warm fuzzies from that either. But what I saw watching these people be deployed that got me was when they left their family. And all the people in uniform wearing the American flag on their shoulder came together. And then they embraced each other. And there were more smiles and more laughter and more tears. And I was like, now that is a family that I can belong to. Arrgh! And I just felt like, I just need to do that. So I raced down to the recruiting depot. Again, and my dad, I couldn't tell my dad. My dad was in during Vietnam, and he was completely against the Army. So I didn't even tell him, and I was 17 years old. And I raised my right hand and joined the delayed entry program. Right? So then I was like, well, what's the delay? Like, let's go now. And they're like, whoa, you have to graduate high school first. And I was like, ooh. Not really. I was a smart kid, but I wasn't the best student, right? No one was making me do homework, so kind of wasn't getting done. And I remember going in to meet my guidance counselor, and I was like, hey, I want to join the Army, and here's the deal. Like, am I going to graduate this year? And she was, like, looking through my folder. Ooh, honey. No, you're not. And I was like, well, I have to, though. Like, this is what I want to do. Like, I have to do this. It was the first time I've ever had a goal in my whole life. And she said, well, you can go to 3 nights a week of night school and Saturday morning school, and then you would have enough credits to graduate with your class. So that's exactly what I did. And then I graduated, and little update, the war had started in February when I'm still in, 1991, and it was over in March. Yeah, it's like, whoa, do I still have to join? Answer is yes, they do, you do. But I wouldn't have traded for anything. And I remember, I loved my time in uniform. I got to go to Germany for 4 years. This poor kid from Baltimore got to see all of Europe, travel, meet new people. And then I, contemplated getting out after my 4 years and going back to school because that became a goal. I was going to be the first person in my family to go to college. And didn't have the grades to get into Georgetown. But, I just was, I just knew that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do it from Germany. And I was a paratrooper. I jumped out of airplanes, went to airborne school, and I was like, I want to do that. So I re-enlisted to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Best place in the world to be a soldier. Anybody been to North Carolina here? Fort Bragg? Yeah, Fort Bragg. Great place. Best place in the world to be a soldier. I was literally doing all those things that I played as a kid, playing war. I was shooting every weapon system known to man and blowing things up and jumping out of airplanes. And, I'd become a leader in the military. I was a non-commissioned officer. People had to do everything I said. It was so awesome, right? And then, like I said, it was the best place in the world to be a soldier and the worst place in the world to be a single dude. 16 guys to every one lady in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Yeah. Any single ladies in here? Yeah. Just go to Fort Bragg. You just have your pick. You, and they all look good, too. They're you look up soldier in the dictionary, and there's a guy from Fort Bragg holding his weapon. It's yeah. But up here, maybe not so much. But you can fix that, right, ladies? You can totally just train that right out of us, right? It was so great. But yeah, I just wanted more, so I got out and moved to Northern California, went to Sonoma State University, right in the heart of the wine country, which is prayers for everybody there right now who are all on fire and losing everything. Yeah, I just, that was, but I couldn't give up the military. So I kept my uniform and did that National Guard thing. 1 weekend a month, 2 weekends in the summer, you've seen the commercials, citizen soldier. And then I remember I was in school and I was interning at a stockbrokerage. My first job out of college, I was a stockbroker, and then went into pharmaceutical sales. But I remember when 9/11 happened. And I turned the TV on just in time to watch the second plane hit the tower. And I'm watching this unfold, and my boss looked at me, he was white as a ghost, and said, Dan, you're still in the Army. Do you think you're going to have to go to war? And I looked at him and was like, no, this is the National Guard. We don't do that. Not these people. Fort Bragg, those guys. Yeah, but you got to remember, in 2001, the National Guard, especially the California Army National Guard, wasn't the most deployable force. And they weren't trained, didn't have money to buy bullets to shoot their weapons. I was a training NCO. People hadn't shot their weapon in 6 years, hadn't taken a PT test, a physical training test, and longer than that. Some of these guys, their uniform just didn't button anymore. So I was just no, we're not gonna go. And I was right for 2 more years. And then at the end of 2003 and moving into 2004, we got deployed. It took our whole battalion of about 700 people to make one deployable company. So basically, of about 100 people. So basically, 1 in 7 were fit to fight. And of those, I think kind of might have messed up the paperwork a little bit on some of them, but we all volunteered to go. And when we first got into theater, I remember it was like the Beverly Hillbillies coming to town. We had these old, horrible Humvees with plywood roofs and makeshift armor on the sides and sandbags on the floor. It was literally oh my God, they're gonna laugh at us when we're rolling in. It was literally, I was playing the Beverly Hillbillies music soundtrack in my head as we're and doing the whole thing and just oh God. But then we started a vicious operational tempo. And we started losing people. I talked a little bit about my first goal in the military. I learned something. I learned something in uniform. I learned how to be a man. I learned about values for the first time, things I didn't get growing up, about loyalty, duty, honor, integrity. Like those things, and that when I got to put my uniform on once a month, it reminded me of who I was, and it became an everyday part of me as a human being. It's just like I am a soldier, like no matter if I'm in a suit or if I'm in uniform. And so as we're going in and we start losing people, it's hard to be that kind of soldier. And then there's something magical about goals. And when the consequence of not meeting your goals is that your best friends die, like the amount of human transformation that's possible in those moments are mind-blowing. Like I watched a group of what I would have called these people become one of the most sophisticated, efficient fighting forces on the planet that I'd ever had the privilege of leading and serving with. Like we got to be good at our jobs, and the operational tempo increased, and the severity and kind of profile of the missions that we were being assigned was increased. And I remember the Battle of Fallujah started on November 7th of 2004. And I was not in the Battle of Fallujah. The reason I remember the date is because they took my medic. I had a guy named Sergeant First Class Goutreau. He's a DC police officer right now, and he was the best at his job. I mean, he was amazing. He talked a lot and was like loud and smoked cigarettes all the time when he wasn't supposed to, and like, he'd be like, man, shut up about that. Like, you just walked and talked, and I just, like, he was just like my guy. But when stuff hit the fan, like Sergeant G could shoot, move, communicate, keep us patched up in the fight. Like he was the best at his job. And so it's no wonder when the Marines needed medics from the Army that they took Sergeant G. And I got this new guy named Dan Nevins from Southern California. I never met him before, and he had this kind of blonde hair that hung out, and his hat was always kind of cockeyed back. And I remember meeting Smee and being like, hey, yeah, welcome to the team. And he's like, oh, hey, so great to meet you. Sergeant Nevins, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, are you stoned right now? Like, no, like we do real hard things here. Like this is, anyway, he turned out to be a good guy, and he was very likable. Like people liked him, and we had a couple missions together. And then November 9th, we got intelligence that some of the insurgency was leaving Fallujah to come attack our area of operations, a place called Balad, Iraq, and LSA Anaconda. One of the largest bases in theater. We had 20,000 multinational forces, DoD civilians. Like it was a big place, a pretty significant target. So like the most professional army in the world, we drew up a battle plan. We decided to meet the enemy where they were, so we practiced, we prepared, we rehearsed every possible contingency, like everything that could go right and everything that can go wrong. And then finally, right before midnight, we felt complete. We had a 4 o'clock in the morning start time the next day. And I remember waking up about 3 a.m., and I was going to be the leader of this mission. Like it was supposed to be my boss. I was the squad leader, and my platoon sergeant was supposed to be the leader of the operation, but he had been fighting through a hernia for 3 months, and we finally found out, like it was protruding through his abdominal wall. And we said, no, Sergeant Adelini, you got to go get that fixed. So we made him go make an appointment, and then all this intelligence happened, and then the plan. But see, if you knew Sergeant Adelini, like my boss, if he was in this room, he wouldn't be the smartest guy in this room. He wouldn't be the most charismatic guy in this room, the most well-liked guy in this room, but Sergeant Adelini would be the hardest working human being in this room. And I don't even know you, and I could say that with confidence. So it was no surprise the next morning when I'm going through my pre-combat checks with my guys. So like, I don't know if I'm a high fiver. I don't know if you guys think that's cool or not, young people. All this stuff, just get up here, right? So my guys know, like, when their pre-combat checks are done, so when I know that they're good to go, I give them a high five, they get in their truck, and one by one, through my 6-vehicle convoy, I give everybody a high five, and I get to my lead vehicle, and I go to tap my driver, Smitty, and he turns around, and it's my boss, Mike. And I'm like, Mike, what are you doing here? And he said, hey, well, I woke up early and found Smitty, and then I told him that he was sick. And that if he didn't agree that he was sick, I was going to make him sick. So he said, Sergeant, I'm sick. So I had to volunteer to drive. So he was just going to drive, drop us off, come back, and we were going to spend 72 hours out at dismounted counterinsurgent operation. So, and he was going to come back, make his plane, and go get his hernia fixed, like all good. And at least he got to be there with us, his men, for some of the mission. So I high-fived Mike. We got in the truck, and we left the main gates of LSA Anaconda at exactly 0400 hours. right on time. And I remember we took a right on a paved road that was pretty well traveled that we called Route Dover, and an almost immediate left on a not so well traveled dirt road en route to what was supposed to be our dismount site. And I'll never forget, it was eerily black outside, completely dark. There were low-hanging cloud covers so you couldn't see the moon or stars at 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was silent, like the kind of creepy silence. I remember my head was bowed in prayer like it was before every mission, and the only thing that I could hear was the very familiar 6.2-liter Cummins diesel engine in my Humvee as we moved carefully down this pitiful road in silence. And I remember being in that prayer, and then, boom! The earth erupted underneath my vehicle and sent it about 6 feet in the air in a ball of fire. I remember being in that prayer, and when the explosion happened, I could feel and hear the truck basically disintegrate around my body. And when I opened my eyes, I realized that I'd been ejected from the vehicle, and my legs remained caught in the twisted and burning metal that used to be the floorboard and undercarriage of the truck. I really didn't know what was going on. I remember I had a sickening knot in my stomach. My face felt hot. My ears were ringing, and I could taste blood in my mouth. And I was trying to make sense of, which way was up, and I was trying to move, and I couldn't. And then I just laid back, and I watched through blurred eyes as my team moved with tactical proficiency, securing the perimeter, doing everything that they were supposed to do. And I was supposed to be the guy calling out orders and saying what to do, yet I was saying nothing, and they were doing everything right. And I knew I kind of had a minute, and I remember watching the dust settle, and I looked forward to the driver's compartment of the vehicle, and I noticed immediately that Sergeant First Class Mike Catalini had made the ultimate sacrifice. It's painfully obvious. It's actually who I wear this bracelet for every day. And it's a memorial bracelet. You've probably seen these in the arms of soldiers and families of soldiers. It just has his name. Sergeant First Class Mike Catalini, Task Force Tacoma, November 10th, 2004, Balad, Iraq. And we wear these as like to honor and memorialize our friends who were killed in action, but for me, it's more than that. This bracelet is a reminder to do two things. The first is to work hard. Like to actually put effort where it's needed. Because, I talk about goals, but a goal without hard work is just a wish. And wishes don't do anything for anyone. Just waste time, fill space. It's like intention without action. Yeah, this bracelet reminds me, like when I have a goal, there's something that I want, that I have to do the work necessary. Because I used to be the guy that have all these plans and visions and goals, and then like I wouldn't do the work, and then I'd be pissed when it didn't happen. Yeah, like this puts my head on straight. And the second thing is this thing reminds me to live. Not just be alive and go through day to day, moment to moment, doing what's expected of me or what I think is expected of me, but to know who it is I want to be, what it is I want to do, and actually live my life in a way that honors that. As a parent, as a grandparent now, as a leader, as a warrior, and as a yoga teacher. I remember seeing Mike, and I knew that I was hurt pretty bad, and I'd yet to really understand the extent of my injury. So like we're trained, I started with my head, and my helmet came apart in two pieces in my hand. And it wasn't a good start, but I was conscious, and that's a good thing. And then I realized, like everything in the government, that helmet was made by the lowest bidder, so could have just been a defect, I don't know. I continued to check myself, my arms, my torso. When I reached up for my legs, that's when I felt it. The unmistakable arterial blood spurt with every beat of my heart. And I knew that I was going to die. I was making my peace with God. I was saying goodbye to my wife and my 10-year-old daughter. I was giving up and losing what seemed like all of my blood in this miserable place on the planet. And then, how they say when you're about to die, your life flashes before your eyes? You've heard that before. But that wasn't my experience. For me, it was more like a slideshow of all the things I'd left undone, the things that I still wanted to do but now wouldn't be able to. And one by one, these images would pop up, and it was like I was saying goodbye. And I really don't remember most of them, but till the last one. It was my daughter. All grown up, dressed in white, and walking down the aisle without her dad. And it's like I shot up and said, Dan, I'm alive. I'm alive. I better do something to keep it that way. So I reached my hand into the wound of my thigh, almost up to my wrist, in an attempt to find the artery and stop the bleeding. Like, I thought I was going to be like MacGyver and just like pinch it off. And be like, I got it. We're just going to walk this off. It's fine. It just didn't work out like that. So I just pressed and prayed that it would give enough time for the medic to arrive. And it's like I blinked my eyes, and there was Dan Smead with his hair. Totally lying to me. Sergeant Nevins, you're going to be all right. It's like I blinked again, and there was a tourniquet on my leg. And I blinked again, there was an IV in my arm. And I blinked again, and my whole team, my family, was there putting themselves in harm's way to remove my legs from that vehicle that was still on fire. It's like I blinked again, and I was on a stretcher and in a helicopter, and then landed right next to the main gates of LSA Anaconda that I just left maybe 10 minutes before. And off into surgery, put the happy juice in my IV, and I woke up. Happy juice. And there was a combat nurse's face right in mine. And I'll never know her name. But I'll never forget her face or what she said to me. She said, Sergeant Nevins, you're a very lucky man. We had to take your left leg below the knee. We managed to save, well, we managed to fix your femoral artery. And like I said, we had to take your left leg. We managed to save your right leg, but you'll probably lose that one too. And she was right. I ultimately lost that 3 years later after 2 years in the hospital and 36 different surgeries. But right about the time I was about to have my pity party for myself, as you'd kind of expect in those moments, I looked up against the wall of the tent, and there was my whole team, my family, just waiting for me to wake up. And instead of that pity party, we kind of shrugged it off. We told stories, some really inappropriate jokes, as people in the military do. We talked about Mike, shed some tears, and then I fell asleep. And I woke up the next morning at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, where I'd spend the next 7 days with surgery every day. And the only thing I could think of is what that nurse said is, I lost one leg and probably the other. What can a guy with no legs do? And in my mind, it was nothing. I used to be a competitive runner. Running is what brought my wife and I together. Like, how would she love me anymore? And my daughter was 10. I used to throw her on my shoulders and play hard like dads do with their kids. Like, how could she look up to me the same way if I can't do the things that I always used to do? I had those 7 days to set myself up for a lifetime of disappointment and loneliness. And then I finally got back to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, where I'd spend the next 2 years, and I met some amazing people, like my nurse, Erica, who was just like the first person I actually got to talk to. And if you knew Erica, you'd know that she was smoking hot. She was gorgeous. And well, she was like, just pretty, then she had pain medicine, so like, woo, like, she was like a 12 out of 10. Like, I think I proposed to her like 3 times. And then I had the great privilege of meeting Wounded Warrior Project at the hospital, who helped, and I still wear this pin every day. It's one warrior carrying another off the battlefield. And they changed my life. They helped me prove that my disability didn't define me, but that I got to define what the rest of my life was going to be like. Through opportunities of snowboarding, wakeboarding, rock climbing, outrigger canoeing, like, they were at my bedside making me take these opportunities so I could show myself that I could be whoever it is I wanted to be. Then I dedicated my life to veteran service after that, 10 years in veteran service. And I remember learning a lot of statistics. I remember learning about the 400,000 warriors right now from a 2008 RAND report that live with PTSD. And I didn't identify with that because, like, I learned how to cope with that through doing physical things like riding a bike, snowboarding, wakeboarding. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Like, all these things. Like, I could use physical modalities to help not have to deal with the invisible wounds of war. Then I learned about the 320,000 that live with a traumatic brain injury and identified with that because they told me I have one, and it's way better now than it was. But I still have a built-in excuse for forgetting birthdays and things, so it's great. Dan, you missed my birthday. Oh, I had a brain injury. And they're like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm like, you should be. And then I learned about the 36,000 people that live with a physical wound of war, and I identified with that because I had to put my legs on every day. But the statistic I never understood was from a 2010 VA study that showed that 22 veterans every day take their own life. I never got it. I never understood it until 4 years ago. I had my last surgery, hopefully my last surgery. It was actually number 36. And I came back to Walter Reed, and I got it all fixed. And the difference was this time I had to go home and rehab by myself. And I had a job. I was working for Wounded Warrior Project at the time, so I had to take the FMLA thing. Any HR people in here? Yeah, Can't call your people, can't email, can't use the phone, like can't be in contact with work. I couldn't ride a bike, I couldn't climb a mountain, I couldn't go snowboarding, I couldn't play golf. I was at home alone. I had my older daughter was now in the Army, and I had a new 3-year-old that I couldn't take care of. I shared with my ex-wife that, I couldn't chase a 3-year-old up and down steps on 2 crutches and 1 prosthetic leg. So all I could think about was these haunting memories that I'd been able to push away for so long. And then it started to get really bad, and at first I couldn't fall asleep at night, and then finally, when I was able to fall asleep, I'd wake up with nightmares, and I used to have to take a handful of Benadryl and chase it down with whiskey just to get back to sleep. And things were falling apart, and I knew that I needed help, but I didn't want to reach out to Wounded Warrior Project because they'd probably send in the SWAT team and take me to some underground treatment center in Tibet or something. I don't know. I wasn't ready for that. So I called a friend of mine, and she said, Dan, you need some yoga in your life. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said to me in your whole life. And then she said, well, what about meditation? And I was like, well, I've tried to meditate. I'm horrible at it. My mind's restless. I'm crazy. I don't get it. When am I supposed to float? I don't know what's supposed to happen. And she was like, well, let me teach you. So she came and taught me about how meditation was about being present to what's actually happening. And then I started to meditate 20 minutes twice a day. And things just got better. I didn't even know what was happening, but I just started to sleep better. And then I wasn't waking up, and I started to take better care of myself. I was more mindful about what I was eating. No one was talking to me about mindfulness, but I was just being more mindful. I was eating better, taking care of myself, and I got my leg back finally after 8 weeks of recovery. And then I remember I made this mistake of calling her to say thank you. I said, Anna, thank you so much for teaching me how to meditate. I'm having all these really great results. And she was like, oh, really? This Eastern BS stuff that you talked so much crap about actually worked for you, huh? And I was like, yeah. She's like, I think you owe me some yoga. And I was like, oh, because I couldn't get out of it now. So I agreed to 3 private lessons. 3 private lessons. And I remember I'm an all or nothing type of person, so I remember walking into Lululemon. Because I had to get an outfit, right? And I remember I get to the door, my man card jumped out of my wallet and was like, bro. And I was like, I gotta do it. So I refinanced my house so I could buy shorts and a pair of shirt and a shirt. And then I got it, I got my yoga mat, and I went to my first lesson. And I remember I rolled out my mat, and she's telling me about Tadasana and standing straight and feet. And I'm like, talk about my feet one more time, watch what happens. Right. And then she's got me in these poses like Warrior One, and I'm like moving and I'm shaking, and she's saying stupid things like, root down to rise up. I'm like, what does that even mean? Right? Press your feet in the ground. I told you say feet one more time. Right? This whole thing, I'm throwing blocks and I'm mad, and my leg is still painful from the surgery. Like I'm just getting my leg, and it was horrible. And I remember driving home just mad. I was sweating. I was like, why was it so hot in there? I don't even understand. I was like, well, I'm never doing that again. And I meant it. I got home, and later my phone rang, and it was Anna saying, hey, let's schedule your next lesson. And then right about the time I was going to tell her exactly where to put that next lesson, I remembered that I committed to 3. And a commitment is a commitment, period. So I showed up to my next lesson, and it was the same thing all over again. I'm wobbling, root down to rise up. I'm like, oh, press, feel the earth. Oh, I'm like, I'm so mad. And I was just wanting to be like, can you just talk like a regular human being and just not, and just, you're coddling me, or I don't even know what it was, but I was mad. And I got so mad, I said, let me try this with my legs off. She just looked at me, and she was like, her eyes were saying, no, let's not do that. But her mouth said yes. And so I remember throwing my legs off to the side, which is a big deal. Like, what you guys don't get is nobody got to see me with my legs off. Nobody. Like, that was what used to be my best feature. And when they were blown off, like, I had to deal with a lot of shame. Well, actually, I never really dealt with the shame. I just had to watch my best part of my body shrivel and become full of scars. And I remember my left leg was held together with what looked like piano wire at one time. Like, I just watched my best asset physically deteriorate into nothing. But then I got these prosthetics to put on, and they were cool. Like, kids thought they were cool. Like, you know, like, because kids stare, and if you have kids that stare, don't be the parent that's like, don't look at that, shh, because that's just weird, right? So, like, whenever kids stare, I just kind of take the initiative. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, right? And they're like, yeah. What happened? I'm like, I didn't eat my vegetables. And they're like, whoa. And their mom's like, yeah. So when I'm like laying there and I'm taking my legs off, I'm like, okay, like I didn't even care that she was seeing me with my legs off. And I remember I was going to do this warrior, because I'm a warrior. I'm going to do a warrior pose. And warrior one is when your back foot's flat, your front knee's bended, you lift your arms up. If I had better shoes on, I'd do it, and not to suit, I would do it for you, be a little closer to the model. But I remember I'm on my knees on my mat, and Anna's back looking at me. She's behind me, probably wondering, what am I going to tell him to do with his foot? Like, I don't know what to say. So I just like took the initiative. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to preface this by saying, like, I'm a yoga teacher, but I'm not the guy, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I'm not like identified as like a granola cruncher or tree hugger or like that. Like, I shoot guns and eat meat and blow things up. Like, I'm just that kind of guy. So, and there's nothing wrong. Like, I kind of am a tree hugger, and I do eat granola, but like the thing that comes to mind, like Mother Earth, that's not me, right? So I'm on my knees, and I'm like, I'm going to do this pose. And like I said, I'm all or nothing, so I just remember saying, okay, what did she say? Root down to rise up. So I just imagined roots growing out of my legs into the ground. And I was like imagining, like visualizing that, and I was connecting down. Like I started to feel this connection when I went to reach my arms up over my head. Like the earth, like no BS, the earth literally sent a jolt of energy up into my body. And it lit me up from the inside out. My arms flew over my head. It was like, if I had to make it into a movie, light would have been shooting out of my hands. It was like getting struck by lightning, but it didn't hurt. It was like the earth was saying, Dan, where have you been for the last 10 years? Tears were streaming out of my face, and I was hooked. Like, that was it for me. And so now, by my third lesson, I was enrolled in teacher training. And then, so I've been teaching yoga now for 4 years, and it's the most important work I've ever done. Like, I will always say that, like, wearing the uniform of my country and leading other soldiers in combat is one of the most significant things I've ever done. And there's nothing that can replace that honor, really. But now the work I get to do is show those people, like those other people who live that same experience, that there's healing on the other side of that just by living a lifestyle that's a little more mindful. To be good to our bodies and to remember that the present moment is all we have, and that we can make choices now to create the future that we want. And I don't know any soldier, any warrior that wants a future where he or she is haunted by their past. And so this work that we're all here today to celebrate and talk about and acknowledge is powerful. And I don't know half of what most of these presenters that are going to come up after me know, but I know that I will forever be a student of this work because it has changed my life, and it is still working to change thousands and thousands of lives, if not millions, in this country and around the world. So my last thought for you is this. Like I said, it's my greatest honor to have served. And then my challenge, my question for you is, how are you being called to serve? Thank you.